Area Day of Remembrance commemoration
is that we are on the unceded homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone people.
We recognize that they lived for centuries in harmony with nature and today gift us the legacy of living as caretakers of the earth.
We pay our respects to the Ramaytush community past, present, and future on this Japanese American Day of Remembrance.
We also thank and honor the ancestors and the survivors of the World War II mass incarceration and declare,
Never forget.
Thank you very much. That's Andy Muraoka, Summer Shapiro, and Ai Yamada. And we will definitely bring them back to the stage as they're going to honor their grandparents' experience in the internment camps. They are students from Rosa Parks Elementary, so thank you very much for those beautiful words. Good afternoon and welcome to the 44th Annual Day of Remembrance. The theme for this afternoon's event, Carrying the Light for Justice. The opening of the program, as you saw on the slideshow up there, was a slideshow of the Nisei, the first generation born in the United States. 81 years ago today, on February 19th, 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, authorizing the forced relocation and incarceration of Japanese Americans living on the West Coast, more than 120,000 of them living on the West Coast, including 600 from right here in San Francisco, were detained and forced from their homes. And the Nisei, who you saw in that slideshow, are the last generation of camp survivors, and our community is rapidly losing them. They came out of the camps only to face a hostile nation, but rebuilt their communities with courage, determination, embracing the American way of life as American citizens. And today we honor them in our Nisei slideshow and later on in our candlelight ceremony. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Yamamoto. I'm a news anchor and reporter right here in San Francisco for KPIX 5 CBS News Bay Area. You can catch me anchoring the noon and 5 p.m. shows. I'm a proud Bay Area native, born and raised in the East Bay, proud graduate of San Francisco State University. Happy to finally be home after spending a 28-year career in Missouri, Idaho, Sacramento, San Diego, Seattle, now finally back here in San Francisco. Traveling around the country and even the West Coast, I was both saddened and surprised how many people knew very little or nothing at all about the Japanese internment experience. The reactions were often full of shock, surprise, sometimes even denial. But as an anchor reporter and journalist, I'm thankful to my stations of being able to allow me to tell the stories of the Japanese American experience and educate our viewers wherever city I was in. Most recently in Sacramento, my wife and I finished the documentary Arnold Knows Me, the Tommy Kono story, telling the true story of Tommy Kono, who learned the sport of Olympic weightlifting at Tule Lake, only to become the most decorated Olympic weightlifter in US history, winning 2 gold medals, a silver, and 6 world titles. That documentary airing in more than 50 markets on PBS stations around the country. In Seattle, I was able to tell several stories from the evacuation of Bainbridge Island, where the first Japanese Americans were taken from their homes. Also the story of the Japanese American settlers of Ontario, Oregon, who found sanctuary away from the camps, farming sugar beets in Eastern Oregon. And most recently, I was able to tell my own family story about an untold story happening right here in the Bay Area, and told right here on KPIX 5 about a place called Keatley Valley, of how a group of 130 Japanese Americans were able to escape the camps and relocate to the state of Utah and live free. My grandparents were part of that colony, led by an Oakland produce owner by the name of Fred Wada. My father was only 4 years old at the time, and last summer I was able to travel to Utah with my family for a Keatley Valley reunion, where today only 9 survivors live right now from that colony. So today we recognize these stories and we realize there are so many other stories that have yet to be told from this very dark time in American history. And that is why today is so important, a day of remembrance, so we never forget, but more importantly, we learn from our experiences of those who came before us, most notably today, the Nisei. We'd like to welcome a few special guests that are here today. We'd like to acknowledge and thank Consul General Yasushi Noguchi for his attendance. Consul General. We'd also like to thank and acknowledge San Francisco District 5 Supervisor Dean Preston. Dean, are you here? For those who don't know, Supervisor Preston submitted a resolution that was passed by the Board of Supervisors proclaiming February 19th an annual day of remembrance here in San Francisco. So thank you again, Mr. Preston. Our keynote speaker today is Don Tamaki. Don is the senior consultant of Manami Tamaki LLP. He has a long career defending the civil rights of Asian Americans. He co-founded the Asian Law Alliance and has served as the executive director of the Asian Law Caucus. He has also devoted time to community service right here in Japantown, serving as the board chair of the Japantown Foundation. But perhaps his most significant work was as a member of the legal team that reopened the landmark 1944 Supreme Court case of Fred Korematsu, overturning Mr. Korematsu's conviction for defying the evacuation order that sent the 120,000 Japanese Americans into concentration camps. More recently, Don was appointed to serve by Governor Newsom on California's Reparations Task Force, which is to study the cumulative, historic, and present-day impact of 250 years of enslavement, 90 years of Jim Crow oppression, and 60 years of segregation, and what California might do to address these harms. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure and honor to introduce our keynote speaker via satellite, I guess, Mr. Don Tamaki.
Ryan, thanks so much for that kind introduction. I am so sorry I'm not there to meet you in person, but COVID kicked my ass. Sorry, folks. But nonetheless, I'm thrilled that you're the one doing the introduction. You know, I'm old enough, and some of the people in the audience are old enough to remember when there were no people of color in the newsroom whatsoever. And the fact that you're anchor of KPIX and of the Japanese American community, believe me, that makes us proud. And it underscores the importance of diversity in the newsroom. And if folks haven't seen the Keatley video that Ryan talked about where he discusses his family, Google it on YouTube. It is a terrific piece. So thank you for doing that, Ryan. I also want to thank Ninjas and the DOR organizers for having me speak here today. It is really my privilege to connect the dots between our struggle for redress and the movement for African American reparations, and to lift up Japanese American organizations who really understood early on how important it is to support this cause. Nikkei Progressives, Nikkei for Civil Rights and Redress, and the Japanese American Citizens League, among others. So on the 25th of May, 2020, George Floyd's murder, captured in an excruciating 9 minutes and 29 seconds of video, triggered the largest protests in American history and moved the legislature to pass Secretary Shirley Weber's bill, creating the task force to study and develop reparations proposals for African Americans, and the 9-member body of which I am a member. The JACL called Mr. Floyd's murder a lynching, stating, "It is easy to be outraged, but we must also be outraged by the systems that underpay Black people, hiring decisions clouded by prejudice, unequal access to capital, the legacy of redlining, and the daily discrimination that continues to exist." Why did a Japanese American organization speak out so strongly about anti-Black systemic racism? I think you know the answer. While there is no equivalence between the discrimination the Japanese Americans experienced and centuries of racial oppression endured by African Americans, we do know something about racial profiling and exclusion. Our families, of course, were among the 120,000 forced out of their homes at gunpoint and incarcerated in 10 concentration camps. Fred Korematsu was convicted for defying the mass roundup. By 1944, his case reached the Supreme Court, and to his shock, the court ruled against him, swallowing the Army's bald assertions that Japanese Americans were spying and that their race made them inherently disloyal. So the court reasoned it was a, quote, military necessity to incarcerate them all. There was only one thing wrong with this narrative. It was entirely made up, and the government knew it at the time. Fast forward to 1982. For more than a year, our pro bono legal team had been secretly poring over boxes of confidential Justice Department documents that Professor Peter Irons and researcher Aiko Yoshinaga Herzig had unearthed, misfiled in the Commerce Department, and forgotten for 37 years. Together, they surfaced Justice Department memos and Navy, FBI, and FCC intelligence reports categorically denying that Japanese Americans were spying, admitting that there was no reason for the mass roundup, and calling the Army's claims, quote, intentional falsehoods. But so powerful was the culture of prejudice in 1944 that despite whistleblower protests from top Justice Department lawyers, that the government had a duty not to lie to the court. The Solicitor General stood by the Army's claims, knowing they were fabricated, and suppressed, altered, and destroyed evidence in order to manipulate the outcome of the Korematsu decision. In other words, the government's own lies revealed that it had perpetrated a fraud in the High Court, with our families at the center of a scandal of epic proportions. In 1983, before a San Francisco courtroom packed with camp survivors, Federal District Court Judge Marilyn Hall Patel ruled that in 1944, the government had lied and falsified evidence before the Supreme Court, and as a consequence, threw out Fred Korematsu's criminal conviction for refusing to be locked up. This ruling boosted our 20-year movement of Japanese Americans for redress and reparations, which culminated in the passage of the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, providing for an apology and $20,000 for each person that had been confined and alive at the time the bill passed. Japanese Americans know how crucial reparations were in healing our community from this great wrong, and in teaching America how easily democracy crumbles when racism, conspiracy theories, and fake news shouts louder than the Constitution. You might ask, why should Japanese Americans care about reparations for African Americans? Let me answer that by juxtaposing two seemingly unrelated historical events, one of which is known today thanks to the research of Nancy Ukai. In 1943, 63-year-old James Wakasa was confined at Topaz concentration camp in Utah, along with Fred Korematsu, my mother and father, and about 10,000 other Americans. One evening, Wakasa decides to take a stroll along the camp's barbed wire fence line. From 300 yards away, the sentry atop a guard tower takes aim and fires, the bullet striking Wakasa in the chest and killing him. No inquest was held, and the guard was exonerated after claiming Wakasa was trying to escape. 2 years later, in 1945, O'Day Short, his wife Helen, 7-year-old Carol Ann, and 9-year-old Barry moved into the house they built in Fontana, California. Sheriffs warned Short they should go back to their own black neighborhood. His real estate agent advised, vigilantes had a meeting here last night, and if I were you, I'd get my family out of here. 2 weeks later, an explosion engulfed the house. Neighbors saw Helen trying to beat back the flames, consuming her children. All family members died. The San Bernardino County District Attorney decided it was an accident. The California Attorney General concluded that no evidence of vigilante activity could be found in Montana, other than the fact that these events occurred just within 2 years of each other. What ties them together? The answer, I think, is that the hate resulting in the deaths of James Wakasa and the Odell Short family has its origins in the racism that propped up the institution of slavery and its aftermath. Slavery has existed for thousands of years, but it was only in the past 400 to 500 years that white Europeans developed a new type of enslavement based on skin color to justify permanent, inheritable, multi-generational subjugation upheld by a culture of white superiority. Once the culture of 1619 used race to dehumanize people to the level of pigs and goats, in the words of Martin Luther King, thingifying them, then the most heinous crimes against humanity could follow without a second thought. Following the end of slavery, this cultural norm, valuing white lives above all others, morphed into forms of hate that put a target on the backs of not just African Americans, but other people of color, including James Wakasa. Simply put, if you can thingify Black people, then demonizing other disfavored groups is easy. Slavery begat the cultural foundation of America's racial hierarchy of white people on top, Black and Native people on the bottom, and everybody else in between. The Civil War ended in 1865, but about 5 minutes after Robert E. Lee surrendered, the South was determined to reinstate laws and ways as close to slavery as possible. And no wonder. For 246 years, the US had built one of the largest and most profitable enslaved economies in the world, with almost 4 million enslaved people and cotton being the economic engine that powered the nation. The Constitution protected slavery and gave Southern states outsized political power. Half of the nation's pre-Civil War presidents were enslavers while in office. More than 1,700 congressmen representing 37 states once enslaved Black people. At the end of the Civil War, Congress seized land from wealthy Southerners, intending to distribute 40 acres to each formerly enslaved person to address the harms of slavery. In January of 1865, 400,000 acres were deeded to 40,000 formerly enslaved who settled on and worked the land. But by April of 1865, Lincoln had been assassinated. Vice President Andrew Johnson assumed the presidency, declaring, quote, "This country is a country for white men, and by God, as long as I am president, it shall be a government for white men." Johnson rescinded the land reparations program, ordered the Black settlers off land they owned, and returned it to the former enslavers. During that 12-year post-Civil War period, known as Reconstruction, Congress tried to give newly freed Black Americans access to basic civil rights, including such things as the right to vote. By 1868, more than 700,000 Black men in the South were registered to vote. Over 1,400 Black Americans held federal, state, or local office. 16 Black men were elected to Congress, 14 to the House, and 2 to the US Senate. But white Northern support soon collapsed. And to resolve the contested presidential election of 1876, Republicans and Democrats cut a deal to withdraw federal troops from the South, effectively ending Reconstruction. To suppress voting, states enacted literacy tests, poll taxes, and looked the other way in the face of racial murders and violence. Nearly 6,500 lynchings nationwide were documented. This is probably an undercount. This is between 1865 and 1950. In 1867, Black turnout was 90% in Virginia. After Virginia's voter suppression laws, Black voters dropped from 147,000 to just 21,000. We think of California as being a more enlightened state, But while California entered the Union in 1850 as a non-slave state, it was plenty complicit with enslavers entering California and bringing their human property with them. California's 1849 anti-slavery state constitution meant little because it was not a crime to keep someone enslaved. The California legislature, in fact, passed fugitive slave laws, allowing anyone accused of escaping enslavement to be chased down and sent back to the South, even if they were living in the free state of California. And much of Jim Crow found its way into California. In the 1920s, California became a strong Klan state, with sizable and violent Klan resurgences emerging in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Oakland, Fresno, Riverside, Sacramento, Anaheim, and San Jose. Our Nisei immigrated into this ultra-racist environment, triggering policies that targeted our families, like the alien land laws barring immigrant Japanese Americans from owning most kinds of real property. You get where I'm going with this. Our community's experience with racial profiling and exclusion is really a subchapter in the country's history of dehumanizing Americans because of their skin color, their ancestry, their religion, their sexual orientation, or other disfavored status du jour. During much of the 20th century, federal, state, and local officials, working with private individuals, actively segregated America into Black and white neighborhoods. When you align the redlining maps of the 1940s with today's pre-gentrification maps of the most impoverished, segregated, and polluted neighborhoods, they align exactly. The past created our present. The federal government agencies help millions of mostly white Americans buy houses while refusing the same opportunity for Black Americans. Between 1934 and 1962, the federal government had issued $120 billion in home loans, but 98% of those loans went to white families. In 1956, so-called urban renewal policies enabled San Francisco to condemn and tear down the Fillmore district, resulting in 20,000 Black residents being displaced and 883 Black-owned businesses being destroyed. 10 years later, San Francisco would likewise declare Japantown blighted, enabling the city to reduce Japantown from 44 blocks to 4, including my father's family, Fuji Hotel at Buchanan near Post, housing Japanese American immigrants, for which the city paid almost nothing compared to its real value. The California Reparations Task Force published a sweeping, nearly 500-page report that you can access free online, drawing a through line from the harm of 250 years of slavery and racial terror, 90 years of Jim Crow exclusion, and decades more of continuing discrimination, resulting in today's outcomes, which are at once shocking but not surprising. With respect to housing and education, America is as segregated today as it was in the 1940s. White households have 9 times more assets than Black households. Black people have shorter life expectancies. And over the past decade, Black babies died at almost 5 times the rate of white babies in San Francisco. And huge disparities persist in housing, houselessness, policing, and criminal justice. Today, while we as Asian Americans are rightfully focused on protecting our community from hate crimes, we also need to realize where the hate comes from in the first place. As long as the pathology that originated in 1619 remains unredressed, the racial hierarchy that it spawned will numbingly recycle, poisoning the soul of America. We need only to look at the Trump years to know this is true. When Asian Americans were blamed for the Chinese virus, when Mexicans were called drug dealers and rapists, when Muslims were labeled as terrorists, when white supremacists declared that Jews and immigrants are poised to replace them, and when one more African American, among countless others, was killed during an encounter with law enforcement, and it barely evoked a shrug because it is so normal. And this racial pathology injects bias into everyone. No one is immune, as illustrated by the debacle involving LA City Council members or the brutal killings in Memphis, killing in Memphis of Tyree Nichols. So where do we go from here? With respect to the California Reparations Task Force, in June of 2023, we will be submitting to the legislature our recommendations for repair about what California can do about this terrible, terrible history. We need to help move the needle of public opinion, thereby creating the political will to pass reparations legislation and to spread the movement across this nation. How do we do that? Well, talk to me. I have lots of suggestions. There are groups organizing, for example, securing endorsements of the task force, the reparations, and the report that we just submitted. But further than that, we can learn a lot from the organizing efforts of our own community that cast our own reparation struggle, not as a demand of an aggrieved minority, but as a justice issue about holding the nation accountable to its professed ideals. We can walk in the footsteps of Black leaders who supported Japanese American reparations, including Congressman Mervyn Dimely, Ron Dellums, and the Congressional Black Caucus. So let's not be complicit with centuries-long, unacknowledged, and continuing wrongs. Let's, as with our struggle for justice, let's take part in making history instead of being its bystanders. Let's remember that each time America has owned up to its wrongs, repaired them, and become more inclusive and more faithful to its ideals, our nation has become stronger, better, and a more perfect union. I thank you very much for allowing me to address you.
And we hope he gets better from COVID. So the internment not only impacted Japanese Americans, but also Japanese from other countries. I'd like now to introduce Grace Shimizu. She is the director of the Japanese-Peruvian Oral History Project and coordinator of the Campaign for Justice Redress, now for Japanese Latin Americans. Her work is focused on documenting, preserving, and interpreting wartime experiences of Japanese Latin American internees and to secure acknowledgement and redress from the U.S. government. Please welcome Grace Shimizu.
Hi, everybody. Oh, it's so good to be here in person with you. Nice to see so many familiar faces and to be here in community with you. Thanks for coming out. Okay, so my name is Grace Shimizu. I am a Japanese American whose family members on both sides of my parents' sides were incarcerated in Amachi, Heart Mountain, Jerome, and Tule Lake under the War Relocation Authority. I'm also a descendant of the former Japanese Latin American internees, JLAs. My father was a Japanese immigrant seized from his home in Peru and imprisoned at Crystal City internment camp in Texas. My father and other family members were among the over 2,200 JLAs who were kidnapped from 13 Latin American countries, interned in Department of Justice concentration camps in the US, used in 2 hostage exchanges, and subjected to post-war deportation and economic exploitation. These crimes against humanity were perpetuated and perpetrated under the US government's World War II enemy alien program, specifically the Latin American Extraordinary Rendition Component. I serve as the director of the Campaign for Justice, Redress Now for Japanese Latin Americans, and of the Japanese-Peruvian Oral History Project. For this year's JLA Redress update, I'm going to bypass our usual history recap and go straight into the update. But never fear, for those of you who want a refresher or are new to our JLA wartime and redress history, you can get access to our basic information at the Campaign for Justice website, or check out our info table downstairs during the reception today. So what's been going on? In 2019, we tasted victory with the groundbreaking Shibayama case decision by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, affirming that the US government owes redress to the JLAs, but no motion from the US government. In 2022, US President Biden acknowledged the JLA incarceration and exclusion from redress under the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 as part of his Day of Remembrance proclamation. This hopeful sign, however, was later diminished upon learning that the Biden administration considers resolution to be under the purview of the US Congress. No motion from the US government, as we and the rest of the world are witnessing the escalating turmoil in our nation, especially in the halls of Congress. The struggle for JLA justice is now in the larger context of the existential threat to our nation's democracy. We are all experiencing the ascendancy of authoritarian movements in the US and many places around the world, emboldened racism, wartime hysteria, and failure of political leadership. The JLA justice struggle is an integral part of the larger struggle against racism, xenophobia, and authoritarianism, and for truth, peace, justice, and democracy. So in this stage of the reparations struggle, redress phase 2, we need to mobilize for social justice action, education, reparations, and democracy. Knowing our past helps us to understand lessons to better face the challenges of today. Collaborative work with other communities is exposing the fuller historical truth of the US government's World War II domestic and foreign policies and actions, which led to massive constitutional and human rights violations across 2 continents. We are expanding and making more inclusive the wartime and redress narrative. And we are reaffirming that the violations were also a racist attack, intersecting with xenophobia and nativism against persons of Japanese ancestry, regardless of citizenship and residency. Our struggle is for historical truth, justice, democracy, and action, to right the wrongs of the past and to build a better future for us all. We want accountability from our elected officials. So please join us in urging the Biden administration and the US Congress to secure proper reparations for the JLAs, to honor the rule of law, including our international legal commitments, and to stop the recurrence of government abuse now and in the future. We ask for your help. Please get involved. You can spread the word about the ongoing JLA reparations struggle. You can support teaching the Shibayama case in law schools. We're asking law school educators to teach the Shibayama case alongside the Korematsu case in their classrooms. This would bring together the teaching of basic constitutional rights and fundamental human rights law, while learning about the real-life treatment of enemy aliens and US citizens of Japanese ancestry during World War II. Doing so will remind students and the legal profession that the struggle for redress did not end with the passage of the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, and that phase 2 of the redress movement continues. It also reminds them that our struggles for justice are being litigated and watched in international tribunals, and that no one should be left behind when one part of an affected group gets redress but not another. Please bring the Enemy Alien Files Hidden Stories of World War II exhibit to your community and campus. This groundbreaking exhibit has been updated and is now on tour. Added as a new feature is the Enemy Alien Files website, with the exhibit tour calendar, booking information, an online version of the exhibit, and other resources. The exhibit is a stunning presentation of the World War II experience of enemy aliens, those in the US and those taken from Latin America. It reminds us of the fragile nature of our constitutional and human rights in times of international and domestic crisis, as well as the human impact of government policies in the name of national security. So please consider volunteering with the Campaign for Justice or the Japanese Peruvian Oral History Project. You can help us preserve the JLA oral histories. We need help to digitize, transcribe, translate, edit, and archive these histories. And we also need help to update the documentary Hidden Internment, the Art Shibayama story, which focuses on the experiences of former Japanese Peruvian internee Art Shibayama and his inspiring activism for JLA justice. Work is now underway to update this film, including the translation into Spanish, Japanese, and Portuguese. Please share your translations, website, social media, technical and writing skills, and contact us to attend our next volunteer orientation session, which is going to be in March. And we always accept financial donations, and you can contact us to be on our mailing list for updates on social justice bills pending in Congress. And we want to highlight 3 of those bills today. Neighbors Not Enemies Act, which would repeal the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. It's an outdated and xenophobic law targeting immigrants under the guise of war. It is the underpinning of Executive Order 9066 and the enemy alien program during World War II, and it was used by Trump to justify the Muslim ban in 2017. Then we have the Korematsu Takai Civil Liberties Protection Act, which would prohibit unlawful detention based on race, ethnicity, national origin, and other protected characteristics. No person should be criminalized for who they are or what they potentially might do. And third, we have the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposal for African Americans Act, HR 40, S40. And as you know, this bill would establish the Study Commission to examine slavery and its ongoing manifestations and impact in the US and recommendations for appropriate remedies. Hey, it's been 35 years this bill's been sitting there. We gotta get that commission established now. So please stay in touch by following our website, Facebook page, and Instagram, and go to the Campaign for Justice website to learn more. Together, we can make a difference. Si se puede. Yes, we can. Hai, dekimasu. Thank you. Arigato gozaimasu. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Grace Shimizu, on the update on the Japanese Latin American internees. While today is the Day of Remembrance, the official Day of Remembrance, this day will also be recognized all throughout the week and throughout the Bay Area, including a Films of Remembrance showcase this Saturday at the Kabuki Theater. This showcase was launched in 2012 by the Nichibei Foundation to educate the public and empower filmmakers by creating a venue for their work. This year's program includes 13 films and 5 programs: films of resistance, rediscovering history, rooted in history, the art of activism, and untold stories. Those films are available in-person viewing or on-demand streaming. Those in-person screenings are this Saturday, February 25th, at the AMC Kabuki Theater right here in Japantown, and on Sunday, February 26th, at the San Jose Betsuan Buddhist Church with film post discussions. Those films are also available to stream from February 25th through March 12th. And now a trailer of this year's Films of Remembrance.
Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii by air.
When World War II started, nobody thought we would be the scapegoat, but it happened.
For years, I wanted to understand what really happened to my people. Did everyone go to the camps without a fight?
There were 30-some questions, and then when it came to 27 and 28, I said, this is really fishy. The government's up to something, I felt.
As long as I am Japanese, I cannot answer yes, no matter how harsh.
All that went through my mind over and over again was a line from Macbeth. I deep in the ditch he bides, I deep in the ditch he bides. And years later, I discovered what that meant.
I have zero memory of what happened.
I told you not to put on customers' clothes.
おじいちゃん、お母さん意地悪。
My husband likes you being here. You always pay the rent on time.
Quick, slow, slow, quick.
Your daughter is missing a figure that teaches discipline.
You don't get it. You aren't American.
I'm so sorry. Can't even get a simple job right.
Have you ever had this feeling where you really miss someone, even when meeting them for the first time? Yeah. Once, when I was younger, I had this friend and we just hang out every day, reading books and playing basketball. Anything to spend time together. I knew instantly upon meeting her that I would miss her forever.
There was nothing but sand in some ramshackle buildings.
You would call a relocation camp, internment camp. It was a prison.
When you see the camp at the beginning, it's just bare. Nothing is planted. People want to make themselves comfortable, and what is one way to do it is to build a garden. This will be a lesson for future generations. Maybe they will be responsible people and not support any ridiculous movement like this in the future.
Prior to leaving Hakone was a very frightening and anxious time for my parents and for us as kids. It was really unsettling to see your own parents frightened. I've never seen that before.
I felt that the Japanese American soldiers, what they did during the war, really exemplified what they used on stamps. That they were really heroes, and they did something that was very unique.
The Postal Service does not give specific guidelines on how to get a postage stamp approved. We just decided to go all out, go for broke in a sense. As a sansei, It's really important for me to remember and to honor my elders, and my volunteering in this stamp campaign has really been mainly because of that.
My name is Johnny Gogo. I am one of our local Superior Court judges here in San Jose. I started this 48-star American flag signing project because I was inspired to do more to help educate our community about the Japanese American incarceration history during World War II. I thought it would be appropriate to obtain a 48-star flag and meet those still surviving camp members.
It's a national historic site because we were the very first group to be incarcerated under the presidential executive order. And this memorial is at this exact site where we were walked down, and the ferry dock was right there.
Those who helped us. While the main characters are largely fictional, most of the people depicted here helped the incarcerated Japanese Americans in real life.
Reverend Andy was there for the Christmas service. He had moved his family to Twin Falls to be near us.
We're going to Block 22 to fill out the questionnaire.
You have a good batch of recommendations here, and those which attest to your American loyalty. Silly thing to have to do.
Exactly.
These are just a few examples of those who helped from across the country. These were bonds that were not so easily broken, no matter what political and racist attitudes influenced what others said and did.
Surprisingly, very few people know about this exodus.
My father told me once that he didn't do anything wrong, and neither did any of us, and he was not going to spend the duration of the war in a camp.
And then came this news that you could leave on a voluntary basis if you had a place to go to, you would not be a burden to the government, if you could do all this within 72 hours.
They're gonna march all of you out, and they're gonna shoot you all.
It was the most miserable time of our lives. They would all spit on us.
Where are you going?
We got a sponsorship.
Your mom and sister deserve better.
How did they know it's better?
I just wanted to make this place more like home.
This is not a home. Are you gonna tell me what happened on the farm? Yukio, you can trust me.
Some powerful stories, some powerful films. Even though I'm in television, it's still weird to see, my dad was in one of those clips. So he's our family story, the Keatley Valley story, is part of that documentary before they take us away. So still cool to see my dad up there. And also the one story I always wanted to go see was the stamp story. How many people still have a book of the Go for Broke stamps? I still have mine like tucked away and framed in it. They're just sitting there right now. But wonderful stories. If you get a chance to see those films this Saturday, please attend. As promised, I'd like to bring back our young stars to the stage here. Andy Muraoka, Summer Shapiro, and Ai Yamada, students from Rosa Parks Elementary, as they reflect on their grandparents' experience in the internment camps. Big round of applause for our students.
I stand on the shoulders of my great-grandmother, Big Grandma Kikwe. She passed away when I was 6. I remember she was always smiling. She gave me my looks. Everybody says that I look like her. I learned and appreciated that she was my big grandma, and she was really nice. She was born in Japan, and she moved to Maui when she was married. She lived under the laws in Maui during World War II. Hawaii was in the center of World War II. They were a really big target.
I stand on the shoulders of my Jewish ancestors who immigrated to America to escape persecution. They gave me the understanding that you can go to a new place, that you can start over, that you can be fearless, and the confidence to build your own life. I learned and appreciate that those who were unable to leave were forced to abandon their homes and suffer atrocities in death camps. I stand on the shoulders of Nisei Uenosaki. He gave me an appreciation for my freedom because he was locked away into a late concentration camp when he was 19. I learned and appreciated that he designed the Japantown Community Youth Council and gave me a newfound appreciation for my family and pet because he was forced to leave his dog behind when going to the internment camps.
I stand on the shoulders of my grandfather, Yamamoto Osamu. I learned and appreciated my Japanese culture. My grandfather and I like to share anpan together. Even though he's 94, he still has a great sense of humor. I stand on the shoulders of the JBBP founders. They gave me a school where I can go to learn Japanese and learn about my culture. I learned and appreciated how much they suffered in the internment camps and what they had to go through to make this school. One of my favorite events at JBBP is Gakugeikai because I like the different performances we do. I also enjoy watching all the performances, especially the kindergarteners because they're so cute.
Thank you, Andy, Summer, and I. How old are you guys?
I'm 8.
Thank you very much. Big round of applause. From Rosa Parks Elementary School. Well, one of the important themes of the Day of Remembrance is not only to reflect on what has happened, but to learn from our past and make sure our country does not repeat our mistakes. And one of the organizations that has been at the forefront of this fight, specifically, please welcome Keiko Kubo with Suru for Solidarity.
Hi, everyone. I'm here as a member of the Suru for Solidarity Family and Child Detention Committee. And we have other committees that I'll talk a little bit about at the end. Suru, there we go. It's okay to go to the next slide. So Suru for Solidarity was founded in 2019, not so long ago, by Nikkei people who were children in World War II concentration camps, along with their allies, to fight child and family detention. And you can see a quote from Satsuki Ina about how other people, where people were silent when we went, and Suru is making a commitment to not be silent and to invite all of you to join us in not being silent about what's happening today. And we wanted to bring some humanity to the story. So we want people to know that there are these things called SIRs, significant incident reports, that are used to control and punish the children that are found in the camps. And we have a quote here from one of the kids about it. And what he said was, "I found they had written a report about me trying to escape. After that, I was put on 1-on-1 for 2 days so that I was never alone because they said I was trying to escape. But I wasn't. I just wanted to get away for a minute after I heard the bad news about my sister." So there are over 60,000 of these reports about the kids, and they can get reports for things like being sad or asking about their family, or just not cooperating with an activity that's happening. And they're not told generally about these reports, and these reports can have a significant impact. So they can lead to kids being punished or even deported. And so we wanted to just share a few of the campaigns that we've done, and we can just kind of run through these slides. There's more information about these things on the SUDU website, and we have some flyers that'll be downstairs, and with where you can see what our website is. And Family and Child Detention Committee has put together a newsletter on child and family detention. We have 4 issues now, and they're all available on the website. You have to kind of search around a little bit, but you can find them and either download them or just read them. And so finally, we really want to invite you to get involved with us. Right now, I'm here particularly to speak for the direct action group that organizes around child and family detention. Folks should know the Biden administration put out an RFP to open 10 new sites, and we've been following that and hope to have a call to action around one of those sites that we know is ready to open and doesn't have people in it yet. And hopefully we'll be able to tell you more about that. This is kind of new news. We also recently had a webinar on family and child detention, and I believe there's a recording of it on the website. And we also are going to have a follow-up one, hopefully late in March, and we'll try to let you know about that. And also invite you again to sign up for our newsletter on the website. So finally, I know that there are a bunch of people that are involved in SUDU that are here today, and so I'm going to ask them to kind of raise their hands up so folks can see. Come on, I know some of you are out there, so that people can talk to you and ask you questions also about what's going on. I mean, some of the people that organized today, people are not, I mean, I should have made you stand up. Come on. But anyway, we also want to let you know that in addition to the child and family detention group, we have a regular orientation group that you can sign up for on our website to figure out if there's a way you want to become engaged with us. We have a SUDU folding crane committee. We have a group of Healing Circle facilitators and a committee that organizes that group, and we would invite you to think about becoming a facilitator, or if you really want to dive in, you can join the committee. We would love that. There's an education and advocacy committee, and finally, we do have campaigns on reparations. We're part of the coalition that's supporting HR 40, and we have a group that's working on police, prisons, and detention. So please ask questions if you have them. Oh, there's one more thing, because I did forget to tell them about our upcoming event, so I feel like I should announce it. But we're co-sponsoring with Densho an event on March 23rd, which is a Thursday, about, and it's called The Past Is Not the Past, and it's about intergenerational trauma, and it focuses on the experience of Yonsei, but everybody's invited. And if you go to the Densho website to the events section, you can register, and it's going to be followed. That's a Thursday, and on the following Saturday, there's healing circles that we're inviting everybody to join in on. And you don't have to be Yonsei, you don't have to be Japanese American to do those. So thanks very much, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Keiko Kubo with the SUDU for Solidarity for your work, also the work with Densho too, an amazing organization based in Seattle. I'd like to bring to the stage Karen Kai. She's the winner of last year's Dr. Clifford Ayueta Peace and Humanitarian Award. Dr. Clifford Ayueta was a San Francisco pediatrician, an outspoken human rights activist, As national president of the Japanese American Citizens League, Dr. Ueda pushed for the successful rescinding of Executive Order 9066. Under his leadership, a grassroots campaign led to the establishment of a presidential commission to investigate the causes and the consequences of Executive Order 9066. And as a result, this brought about public awareness to the injustice and paved the way for redress and reparations. In 2004, the year following his death, the Bay Area Day of Remembrance Consortium created the award in his honor. And here to present this year's winner is last year's winner, Karen Kai, who we recognize along with Robert Rusky for their work in the Fred Korematsu case. So thank you, Karen, also for bringing the beautiful pseudos to our program today. So thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you, Ryan. It is wonderful to be here with everyone. And this is the first time I've ever virtually presented something. So Dawn, you better be out there. I expect to hear how you gracefully took it from me. I was fortunate to work with Dawn on the Korematsu case and also on the Issei Women's Legacy Building case. And he is such a remarkable person. I mean, you can read his resume and say, wow, this guy, he's so smart and dedicated. He's visionary. How was he not honored earlier in this chain of people who have received this award? Don's also very patient. And I think sometimes people overlook one of his truly remarkable characteristics. He is a consummate teacher. And I think that's because it comes from his heart, that he knows and believes that when we teach each other, when we share and listen and come together in understanding, then we move mountains. And Don has done this over and over again. I am so pleased that Governor Newsom recognized him and chose him to be on the African American Reparations Commission, because I think one of the things Don will do very uniquely is to teach people how our lives, our histories, and our heritages are so intertwined, and why we therefore must stand up for one another. So Don, thank you so much for your continued work. Thank you for being my teacher and my friend, and a friend to all of us in the community. I guess I hold this up now for him to see. I'm handing it off virtually, but also this is an honor for all of us to have to share with you today. Thank you very much.
My turn now, Karen. I'm really overwhelmed, and I really appreciate that gracious introduction, even though you did kind of lay it out kind of thick, Karen. Back at you. I mean, without Karen Kai and Bob Rusky, they were indispensable members of the Korematsu legal team and provided invaluable assistance to the legal teams for Min, Yasui, and Gordon Hirabayashi. And really the conscience as well as strong intellectual foundation of these legal teams. And the other thing you mentioned, Karen, the Sokobukai case, the YWCA case that resulted in the preservation of this Julia Morgan designed building after the YWCA was trying to seize it. Without your efforts, I mean, you know, the building would be condos by now. So to be introduced by you is fantastic. It's really quite an honor. Turning to Dr. Ueda, to be mentioned in the same breath with him is quite an honor. I met him after I graduated from law school when he was championing the fight to vindicate Iva Toguri, who was falsely accused of disloyalty And of course, for those who are old enough, grew up in the 50s and 60s, we remember the Hollywood movies demonizing and vilifying, caricaturing her. And I always thought that was an uphill battle, had very little chance of going anywhere. And Dr. Ueda fought that and actually changed history. And in addition, his support for redress and reparations was absolutely essential in developing support. And later on, he shined an unblinking light on other human rights causes, and of course worked tirelessly with ninjas and JACL to make sure that our history is preserved. So I'm so happy that Dr. Ueda's memory and what he did lives on. So great honor to receive it. Thank you so much. I need to thank my wife, Suziata, who tolerates my angry Asian man rants. I got to thank the partners at Manami Tamaki LLP who support my angry Asian man rants, and my co-conspirator Dale Manami, who continues to inspire my angry Asian man rants. So thanks to them also. I'm finally just want to say how disappointed I am not to be there with you in person, but I didn't want to turn this into a spreader event. So thank you for just letting me appear on the screen on the wall. But know that I deeply feel your presence, and I appreciate every moment of it. Thank you so much.
Asians. Yes, we do. We appreciate it. And thank you, Karen, also for that presentation. So moving on, there is a power that sometimes can only come in words that evoke emotion, a sense of community, a sense of struggle, a sense of enlightenment. Lauren Ito is an American Gosei, fifth-generation poet. Through her career, she has worked internationally, tackling topics from civil rights, hate crimes, and sustainability. Her work delves into the experiences of the American concentration camps, identity, and home. Lauren's work has been featured in the Seattle Times, the Japanese American National Museum, and she was currently the artist in residence for the National Japanese American Historical Society. So please welcome Lauren Ito.
Thank you, everyone. Similar to other folks who have had the reflection of it is really special to see people's faces in real life, I am having that same moment as well. And also just want to express gratitude to everyone who has spent many, many hours since last year organizing today's event. So today I'll be reading a personal essay about my grandfather, and his name is Jack Samishima. It's titled, If These Pages Could Talk. What's this, Grandpa, I ask, fingers curling around an artifact on his coffee table that I've never seen before. Oh, that, he replies awkwardly, kicking his swollen, bionic braced leg in my direction, the constant reminder of his World War II Purple Heart from the shredding force of shrapnel. That's my high school yearbook. He turns back to the baseball game. Mariners are playing the Mets, Mariners in the lead. Curled up on the floor, my fingers peel back a weathered, gritty white yearbook cover with Jefferson High School embossed upon it. A page of exquisite calligraphy greets me. Cartoon figures of football players and cheerleaders waving American flags border the pages. The swath of signatures takes me back to my own high school yearbook, but instead of hackass and hags, they're replaced with "You're one heck of a pal, have a great summer, have a swell summer." Reading through the swells and the pals, a giggle escapes from my lips. I look up at my 93-year-old grandfather in his recliner, arthritis-riddled hands like crooked tree roots, and salt and pepper hair freshly trimmed by the barbershop he frequents militantly every 2 weeks. This yearbook reverses time itself. Through it, I'm introduced to a grandpa I've never known before, a grandfather who doesn't cut out foam insoles for shoes to ease the pain of his limp, a grandfather whose shoulder had never met the 22-pound weight of a World War II Browning automatic rifle. This grandfather, is a Sansei boy in his formative years with a bright future ahead. I wonder who he was in high school. I wonder about his hopes and dreams. I wonder what he feared, and I wonder what he longed for the most. Hungry for any hint at these answers, I turn to the next page. Another calligraphy blanketed page greets me, but one signature is etched bolder than the others. It reads, Jackson, I guess you're swell for a Jap. The words swallow me whole. I gasp at these letters charge the lightheartedness from curved swoops of graceful salutations. A churning boils in my gut as my eyes desperately search the page for anything to tame this nauseating feeling. They land on another signature delicately etched at the corner of a page. To my fellow inmate. You're a real swell guy, the best in Block 9. I look back up to my grandfather's 93-year-old frame cradled in the recliner. An ice pack now rests atop his swollen ankle, elevated to dull the pain. As a child, I had once naively asked him if ice just made it stop hurting. The answer was laughter and a no, followed with a sigh. Why does it say inmate in here, Grandpa? A quiver infiltrates my question. A quiver infiltrates my question, one ripped from the carefree adolescent bliss of cartoon cheerleaders waving American flags. It was my sophomore yearbook. We got sent away to camp the year after. We didn't have much money back then, and it was one of the few things I really owned as a kid. So when we had to pack up, I took my yearbook with me. Some signatures are from school, but I had people sign it in camp too, after I was drafted, before I got sent off to fight in the 442. I didn't know when I'd see anyone again. He says camp so naturally. It's as if he's recalling a summer camp, but I know the weight of that word. He's referring to a dark, desolate place behind barbed wire, barracks in which families were packed like bloated cans of sardines, and where walls were so paper thin, the cries of shivering babies echoed through the whole block. It's a place that ground scars into my grandfather's bones long before his flesh bore the scars of combat. This is the place I grew up hearing next to nothing about in my history classes, but hearing everything about over ochazuke at my family's dinner table. This is a place whose trauma I never knew personally, but viscerally inherited. From a shutter at the numbers 9066 to the grit-etched pages of my grandfather's yearbook, a grit I now recognize isn't mere wear and tear, but the lingering desert dust from scorching summers imprisoned behind barbed wire at Camp Harmony in Washington, then Camp Minidoka in Idaho. Afraid my face will unleash the emotions bubbling forth, I turn back to the page in front of me, and I read another wave of signatures with a distinctly different tone. To my fellow inmate, I'm glad I got to be with a pal like you behind barbed wire. Glad I don't eat at the mess hall you cook at. If I did, I don't think I would make it out. God bless you, Jack. And on the last page, a final signature catches my eye. These sentences framed with the brown scars of internment camp dust and written in scribbled pencil. To my fellow inmate, the horizon looks pretty bleak, but I hope there's light. But I hope there's light amidst our uncertain futures. A tear beads in my eye, but I quickly wipe it away. If only these pages could talk. I take a deep breath and look back up at my grandpa. He's the same man as always, but now I feel as though something has shifted. I now wondered how he transitioned from a high school in Seattle to a high school where soldiers in guard towers pointed their guns inward. I now wonder about his hopes and dreams as a prisoner in his own country who never committed a crime. I now wonder what his mother, who was his single mother of 6, feared the most. And I now wonder what he longed for when huddled in the trenches of Italy with bombs and bullets peppering overhead. And most of all, I wonder how the hell did he make it through? My grandfather's light gray eyes meet mine, but I can't hold the weight of this gaze. I look to the cane propped against the chair to his left, then to a stack of phone books bound together with knotted cloth at his right. Why so many phone books, I ask. It's my weight, he replies. His fingers thread through the loop of fabric atop the book stack. I made it to do my exercises. He lifts the books up with a groan, gingerly raising the pile above his head. then back down, then back up again. His motion assumes a cadence as his brow furrows with focus on the task at hand. You know, he says, you always have to keep moving, even if you can't move much. Only moments ago, I was asking myself how my grandfather made it through, and this statement over a pile of cloth-knotted phone books was my answer. Do you want to try? He asks. I put the yearbook back down on the coffee table and then reach my hand out to grip the pile. Yes, I respond. I will try. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren, for those beautiful, powerful, emotional words. Very reflective. Thank you. Thank you for your grandfather for his service, the 442nd. Moving forward, I'd like to bring up Reverend Joanne Toulousa, Reverend Rodney Yano with the Concord Church of San Francisco for our purification ceremony.
Good afternoon, everyone. We will now begin the purification ceremony. So before we start the purification, we clap our hands 4 times. And so one hand alone cannot make a sound. So it represents working together with our divine parent, working together with everyone here in the community. So before we clap, please clap with the sincerity of your heart and the joy in your heart as well. 4 sincere claps. Blessing by head officiant.
Let us humbly bow our heads to receive this candle-lighting blessing and purification rite, to symbolically cleanse our hearts and minds of negative thoughts and emotions, and fill our hearts with appreciation for this Bay Area Day of Remembrance 2023 event, carrying on the light for justice 81 years after Executive Order 9066 and the 35th anniversary of the passage of the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, whereby 60,000 survivors of the camps were granted reparations. We joyfully gather once again in person here at the Japanese American Religious Federation member church, Christ United Presbyterian Church. We pray to our divine universal parent Kami to bless this special event and send our sincere thoughts and hearts of love and respect to all those who were interned during World War II, the majority who have already transitioned to their spiritual form, whom we pray for their eternal peace and happiness, and their names have been recorded in the comprehensive Ireicho book at the Japanese American National Museum as permanent proof for all to see the injustice they endured and most overcame. We thank you for your legacy and virtues, which we hope are passed on to your descendants and handed down to future generations. Dear Divine Universal Parent, please bless the carefully selected candlelighters who are honored to represent each of the internment camps, DOJ facilities, and all the people of Japanese descent who were ordered to live at these respective desolate locations during World War II, and those detained an extra 2 years thereafter. Let us fill our hearts with strength, resilience, healing, gratitude, peace, joy, love, and understanding. And may we have compassion for all facing injustices and be advocates. May resolutions and redresses and reparations continue. To our divine mediator, Ikigami Konko Daijin, to our divine parent of the universe, Tenchi Kai no Kami, we deeply thank you.
Onusa Gyoji, purification rite. Please bow your heads. Let us purify our hearts by letting go of our negative thoughts and emotions. Thank you. Ichido Haide, 4 sincere claps together.
Thank you, Reverend Toulousa, Reverend Yano. And now I'd like to hand over my MC duties as we begin our candlelight ceremony. I'd like to introduce and bring to the stage Matthew Kojima and Bhairavi Senthil Kumar.
Our candlelighting structure was created by George Iwao, a former incarceree and member of the National Coalition for Redress and Reparations, who passed away in 1992. There are 11 candles, one representing each of the 10 War Relocation Authority camps, and the center candle representing the 9 Department of Justice camps, including Crystal City, Texas, where most of the Japanese Latin Americans and some persons of German and Italian descent from the United States and Latin America were held.
We hold this candle lighting ceremony annually to commemorate and remember those people unjustly incarcerated by the American government during World War II.
Lighting the candle in remembrance of those incarcerated at the 9 Department of Justice camps is Eloy Mayoki. Eli Mayoki was born in Chiclayo, Peru. During World War II, at age 4 years, he and his family were among 2,264 persons of Japanese ancestry who were abducted from 13 Latin American nations and imprisoned in U.S. concentration camps for use as hostages and 2 exchanges for U.S. citizens held by Japan. Eloy was imprisoned for 4 years in Crystal City internment camp in Texas. He's a founding member of the Japanese Peruvian Oral History Project and Campaign for Justice, Redress Now for Japanese Latin Americans. Eloy continues to educate the public about this hidden wartime history and the ongoing struggle for proper redress for these war crimes and crimes against humanity perpetrated by the U.S. government.
Lighting the candle in remembrance of the 10,046 Nikkei incarcerated at the Manzanar concentration camp in California is Mary Kaneo Hidekawa. Mary Kaneo Hidekawa is a survivor of the Amachi concentration camp and has lived in San Francisco with her family since 1950. She was forcibly taken to Amachi at the age of 16, where she was part of the first graduating class at Amachi High. Mary went on to work as a secretary in the hospital until she left camp in 1945. She has since been involved with the Nisei Fishing Club for the last 50 years and currently serves as a board member. In addition to being an incredible great-grandmother, Mary is an avid Warriors fan and an art maker.
Lighting the candle in remembrance of the 9,397 Nikkei incarcerated at the Minidoka concentration camp in Idaho is Lucy Arai Abramson. She's lighting the candle to honor Kei Sekimachi. Kei Sekimachi was age 16 when she and her family were forced into the Tanforan and then Topaz incarceration camp. As a teenager in camp, Kei painted watercolor scenes of the barracks of Tanforan. She later studied weaving and is now recognized as a pioneer who helped establish fiber art as a medium of artistic expression. Kei's art has been featured in numerous museums, including Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Fine Art Museums of San Francisco, the Oakland Museums, the Smithsonian Institution, and the MoD in Paris.
Lighting the candle in remembrance of the 8,497 Nikkei incarcerated at the Jerome concentration camp in Arkansas is William Bill Sato. Bill Sato was born in Poston concentration camp. He has a 32-year teaching career, including chairing the Ethnic Studies Department at Laney College, where he initiated a team-taught course titled Perspectives on American Racism. Bill was also a founding member of the National Coalition for Redress and Reparation, in which he served as part of the historic 1987 lobbying delegation in Washington, D.C. to support redress for Japanese Americans via H.R. 442. In retirement, Bill serves on the boards of the Sakura Kai and the North Berkeley Senior Center.
Lighting the candle in remembrance of the 17,864 Nikkei incarcerated at the Poston concentration camp in Arizona is Mary Ann Furuichi. Mary Ann Furuichi is a native of Berkeley who has taught in Berkeley schools for 35 years. She also teaches Taiku at Darumo no Gakko and seniors at Sakura Kai. During the August 2022 Tanforan Memorial Ribbon Cutting Ceremony, Mary Ann read a memory of her childhood view of eucalyptus surrounding Tanforan. She read, "Uprooted, our lives were invaded and changed forever, but like the majestic trees, we survived." Mary Ann is also a board member of the Contra Costa JACL.
Lighting the candle in remembrance of the 10,767 Nikkei incarcerated at the Heart Mountain concentration camp is Patricia Yamakawa Yamamoto. Patricia Yamakawa Yamamoto was incarcerated with her family at Pomona Assembly Center and then Heart Mountain concentration camp. She has worked with children and adults with disabilities for over 30 years as a substitute teacher and has also been involved with advocacy and programs for people with disabilities. Patricia also works with local United Methodist churches and other agencies to alleviate hunger and injustice both locally and abroad.
Lighting the candle in remembrance of the 8,475 Nikkei incarcerated at the Rower concentration camp in Arkansas is Joan Miura. Joan Miura and her family were forcibly confined at the Tulare detention facility and then incarcerated at the Tule Lake. When the camps were segregated, Joan and her family were slated to be moved to Topaz. However, because her mother was pregnant and not allowed to travel, the family was ordered to remain at Tule Lake, separating them from their many relatives. Joan and her family were eventually moved to Topaz. Joan is currently living in Northern California and works as a consultant and administrator. She's lighting a candle in honor of her parents, Toru Tuli Miura and Mie Kasai Miura.
Lighting the candle in remembrance of the 13,348 Nikkei incarcerated at the Gila River concentration camp in Arizona is Jun Dairiki. Jun Dairiki was born in San Francisco and incarcerated at Tanforan and then Topaz concentration camp at age 7. At Topaz, she attended Desert View Grammar School and Mountain View Grammar School. After the war, her family moved to Idaho. Through the U.S. Federal Civil Service, June worked with the Air Force in Nagoya, Japan. She also worked at Chevron for over 40 years.
Lighting the candle in remembrance of the 8,130 Nikkei incarcerated at the Topaz concentration camp in Utah is Yoshiko Takemoto Ho. Yoshiko Takemoto Ho was born in Pescadero to Kiso and Inoi Takemoto. Her family moved to San Francisco and settled. When Yoshiko was 4 years old, she and her family were incarcerated in the Tanforan and then Topaz concentration camp. Yoshiko Ho is also an active member of the Christ Presbyterian Church.
Lighting the candle in remembrance of the 7,318 Nikkei who were incarcerated at the Amachi concentration camp in Colorado is Michiko Tashiro. Michiko Tashiro grew up in Turlock, California. She and her family were imprisoned at the Merced Assembly Center and then the Amachi concentration camp. Upon leaving Amachi, Michiko's family lived in a tent camp for a year before moving to San Francisco. Later in her life, Tashiro developed an interest in writing and sharing stories from her time in camp. Michiko writes and discusses the dynamic between her siblings and parents before, during, and after camp, and how her family was able to endure difficult times together. She continues to share her stories at a writing circle at the Japanese Cultural and Community Center of Northern California.
Lighting the candle in remembrance of the 18,789 Nikkei who were incarcerated at the Tule Lake concentration camp in California is Sadako Nimura Kashiwagi. Sadako Nimura Kashiwagi is 89 years old. She was born and raised in the Sacramento area and was incarcerated from 8 to 12 years old at Tule Lake Segregation Center. She was married for 61 years to Hiroshi Kashiwagi, actor, poet, writer, nonaboy, and resistor, before his passing in 2019. Sadako worked as a children's librarian at the San Francisco Public Library. Since retiring, she has shared her camp experience and passion for social justice with students.
To honor the courage and determination of those people unjustly incarcerated by the United States government during World War II, in memory of those who today are experiencing violations of their civil and human rights, we now observe a moment of silence.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Bhairavi. And also thank you to Callan Nishimoto, Kumiko Ueda for setting the proper tone for us. And also thank you to our Nisei for lighting the candles this evening. So here's our call to action for the Bay Area Day of Remembrance Interfaith Vigil. On Thursday, February 23rd at noon at the California State Building in Oakland, the vigil brings together faith communities in commemorating the imprisonment of Japanese Americans during the war and draws parallels with present-day immigrant detention. Pat Yamamoto, one of our candlelighters, will speak along with the immigrant refugees who have in ICE custody. Please join us as we remember the 81st anniversary of Executive Order 9066 and a call for the closure of all immigrant detention facilities and prisons in California by 2025. And finally, to end our program, I'd like to introduce our ministers from the Japanese American Religious Federation for their closing benedictions, Reverend Rodney Yano, Reverend Elaine Donlin, and Reverend Grace Kaori Suzuki and Pastor Hiroko Suzuki.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rodney Yano. I'm from the Konko Church of San Francisco, right up the street, 1 block away. And so this morning, this afternoon, I'm honored to give the benediction for the Konko Church faith tradition. And so when I think about the Day of Remembrance, what brings to mind, one word that comes to mind is about respect. Respect. This whole, everything is about respect. The candle lighting ceremony is about respect for our ancestors, respect for the past, respect for all the hard work that goes in, even for people fighting for their rights even today. It's about respect. And so a takeaway that I want everyone to think about today, after this ceremony, after we do our march, is to bring back that feeling of respect. Sometimes, when life goes on and there's hard times, we forget to respect everybody. We forget to respect our differences. People who are different, even people who are the same, even our own family members. It's hard to respect sometimes, right? You get to little bickering, little fights, little arguments here and there. But that's what I want people to think about, is how can we bring back this sense of respect for each other, for ourselves, and for our community? Because I think once we start respecting everyone, it starts to build up on that. And it goes back to this sense of love and appreciation. Because when we respect someone, we love them. We're sharing our appreciation for them. So that's what I want everybody to take away today. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. In just a few weeks, the Buddhist Church of San Francisco will be celebrating and recognizing our Ohigan service. This is from the journal of Reverend Daisho Tano, dated March 22nd, 1942, on the first Buddhist observance held in Tuna Canyon Detention Station. Quote, "Today is Sunday. At 9 a.m., there was an outdoor Christian service. I admire the practice of holding Sunday services without fail, wherever one may find oneself. Today is the spring equinox, so the various Buddhist sects decided to come together this evening for an Ohigan service. We hung a painted image of Amida Buddha in C block and chanted the Junirai, the 12 praises of Amida Buddha, all together. Gathered as Buddhists in the hall that was full to capacity, I was filled with emotion to be observing this year's Ohigan service in such an unexpected place. Having been tasked with giving the Dharma talk at the Ohigan service in this unexpected place, I entitled my talk, Our Ohigan, and spoke about the ideals we might aspire to as people being held prisoner. I was encouraged when Pastor Izumi from a Christian congregation in Santa Barbara said it was a good sermon. Pastor Nakane also said he enjoyed the way my voice carries when I speak. It is a great thing when a person is able to respond to words of someone who holds a different point of view with frank words of appreciation, end quote. The religious leaders in the concentration camps modeled how to live a life of dignity, service, and compassion, all the while holding different religious points of view in extremely arduous conditions. May we continue to uphold these praiseworthy values, to continue to come together to respond with compassionate support, caring and sharing the light for justice for all. In the Shin tradition, we have been awakened to the compassion of Amida Buddha's universal vow, Namo Amida Butsu. May we endeavor to live a life of compassionate service for others. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namandots, Namandots, Namandots.
Good afternoon. My name is Reverend Grace Kaori Suzuki, and I am the pastor here at Christ United Presbyterian Church. Thank you so much for coming, and we are honored as a congregation to be able to hold the Day of Remembrance here this afternoon. Myself and also my associate, Pastor Hiroko Suzuki, we have brought words for our benediction and blessing. As we gather on this 44th anniversary of the Day of Remembrance, which is also the 81st anniversary of Executive Order 9066, we acknowledge that our work for justice is not complete. As we hear the voices of survivors, the ways in which justice continues to be denied for some of us, and acknowledging that there are so many broader injustices in our world, we are moved to work toward in bringing about a glimpse of what God's kingdom looks like, one that is full of justice, righteousness, and mercy. 私たちは今日81年前に発令された大統領令9066号を覚え、この追悼の日に集まりました。私たちは今も正義の行われる社会が築かれるために祈り、この大切な働きに私たち一人一人が招かれていることを心に留めましょう。Over 30 years ago, our government acknowledged and apologized that it had unjustly incarcerated persons of Japanese descent during World War II. The government admitted that the cause of that injustice was racial prejudice, a sense of hysteria, and a failure of political leadership. Unfortunately, we continue to see these very same dynamics from the 1940s in our country and in our communities today. People are mistreated and misunderstood merely by the color of their skin. Fear grips our communities and steers our misguided decisions. However, let us not be paralyzed by fear or discouragement, but rather let this be a passionate reminder that each one of us is invited. We are called to take part in this crucial work of carrying the light of justice today more than ever. 人は恐れに駆られるとき、間違った判断をし、正義を行うことができません。それなので私たち一人一人が心に平和を持ちつつ出ていき、憐れみと正義の心を抱き、嫌悪と恐れの壁を砕き、深い理解と寛容を培うことを心がけましょう。
So please bow your heads and pray with me. Gracious God, we give you thanks for your amazing, unfathomable love, your promise to be with us always. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to gather here today to remember the internment of Japanese American during World War II and reflect on our responsibilities to help this country not to make the same mistake by making a policy driven by race prejudice. As we close the 44th Annual Bay Area Day of Remembrance, we ask for your continued guidance and help. Help us to be open-minded and listen to one another with respect as we work together to make our society to be a more just one. Oh God, continue to remind us that you want us to be your hands and feet to bring your justice, peace, reconciliation, and hope in this world. We pray these things in your name. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you to our ministers and the Japanese American Religious Federation, Reverends Yano, Donlin, and Reverend Suzuki. This now takes us to our procession as we walk to the Kimoengakuin Japanese language school established in 1926. During the outbreak of war, it was seized by the US government and used as a processing center where people of Japanese descent in San Francisco, Japantown, had to report. And then they were put on buses and sent first to Tamfaran Detention Center before being moved to the concentration camps. Please head to the entrance to the lobby where you will be given a candle, then go downstairs carefully to Sutter Street and wait for the procession to get underway. And after stopping at the school, we will return back to the church for a reception in the first floor social hall. No, thank you. Did that work out? Okay.